stage of decomposition generally occurs between 0 to 3 days post-death. Putrefaction occurs 4 to 10 days, black putrefaction in 10 to 20 days, butyric fermentation within 20 to 50 days, and the fifth stage, dry decay, takes between 50 and 350 days post-death. There are a number of factors, though, that actually increase this rate of decomposition in a cadaver. First and foremost, exposure to the elements. According to Casper's law of decomposition, wait, are you serious? Casper like the friendly ghost. Who comes up with these names? Scientists, real talk. I love the nerdy, tongue-in-cheek naming conventions that you use, but sometimes it's really hard to take you seriously when you're naming laws after children's cartoon characters or proteins after Sonic the Hedgehog. Anyway, Casper's law of decomposition states, quote, that a body left in the open air decomposes twice as fast as if it were immersed in water and 8 times faster than if it were buried underground, end quote. So those zombies, just by rising up out of the ground, have increased their rate of decomposition 8-fold. The second key factor here is temperature. Heat accelerates the rate of cellular breakdown and increases the rate of putrefaction. The hotter and more humid the temperature, the quicker the body will decompose. So obviously, the zombies on the show aren't decaying at the rate of a typical human body. But what exactly is this zombie decay rate? The Walking Dead up to season 6 has taken place over 552 days since the zombie outbreak began. A typical human cadaver would have decomposed twice over, at least, at this point. So given that season 6 depicts zombies in the latter days of black putrefaction, blackened skin, liquefied organs, which tends to happen around 20 days post-death in a normal cadaver, we can use this as correlative evidence to predict when complete zombie decay will occur. If 20 days equals the typical amount of time for a cadaver to reach black putrefaction, and the same process for the Walking Dead zombies is 552 days, then using some simple math, 20 over 552 equals 50 over x, the unknown complete dry decay for a zombie, we can predict that the zombies will have completely decayed in 1,380 days. This would be the complete life cycle of a zombie on The Walking Dead. That's a really long time. Look what's happened in just a year and a half on the show. Plus, then the zombies would just be skeleton zombies. By then, The Walking Dead will be hiring Ray Harryhausen. Sorry, that was an obscure reference. Ray Harryhausen was a pioneer of stop-motion animation, and perhaps his most famous scene is a skeleton battle that happens in the movie Jason and the Argonauts.
Now you know!
It's one of those lesser-known pieces of cinematic history that definitely deserves some celebration, so worth mentioning here. But that being said, The Walking Dead isn't Jason and the Argonauts. The one thing that keeps the zombies going isn't their skeletal bodies, it's their brains. And it probably comes as no surprise that it's not just the external body that decomposes post-death, but internal organs do too. And so when in the decomposition timeline does the brain liquefy? Black putrefaction, the very stage the zombie horde is currently in. Rick doesn't have to shoot or stab a zombie in the head to kill it, he just has to wait for nature to take its course. Step 1, find another prison. Step 2, build a stronger fence. Step 3, profit. So how long should Rick expect to be a dirty camper? At the CDC in season 1, Dr. Jenner shows them the onset of a zombie. Per Dr. Jenner, zombies don't function on the entirety of their brain, just the brain stem.
The frontal lobes, the neocortex, the human part, that doesn't come back.
Thus, it's not even the entirety of the brain that needs to decompose, just the stem. In a typical cadaver at room temperature, this process would take a month tops. If 20 days equals the typical amount of time for a cadaver to reach black putrefaction, and this same process for the walkers is 552 days, then using the same formula, 20 over 552 equals 30 over x, the amount of time for zombie brain melting, the brains in zombies will completely melt in 828 days. Subtracting out the time that's already happened on the show, Rick and the gang only have to survive 276 more days until the majority of zombie horde brains turn to complete mush. However, this decay rate isn't accounting for the temperature, the humidity, or the exposure to the outside, all of which increase the rate of decomposition tremendously. So using Casper's law of decomposition, we can predict that this process will happen at least 8 will be just that. Lifeless corpses once more. If that isn't enough, look no further. Slow its timeline down so much because the creators themselves know that the zombies are on borrowed time. If you need more proof, look at the location, Alexandria, Virginia. According to the Rick and the gang in 15 set over the course of 1 hour in a blizzard in Antarctica. Try as hard as you want, AMC writers, but there's no stopping the inevitable. It's not a question of if the zombies will go extinct, but a matter of when. Time is a zombie's biggest killer, and soon, time will end the zombie threat and The Walking Dead as we know it. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. And before you go, did you know that The Walking Dead has hidden references to the Roman Empire sprinkled throughout its various seasons? It's true. The parallels are actually fascinating. If you want to find out more, click here to check out a brand new video from my friends over at Wisecrack, where they're picking apart the series to uncover the deeper meaning hidden under its fleshy folds. In fact, here you go. Click their logo to check out the whole channel. If you're a fan of my theories, then you're gonna love their interpretations of all things pop culture, from The Matrix to Rick and Morty. So head on over and tell them Matt Pat sent ya. They'll appreciate it. And finally, in case you missed it a couple weeks ago, here's a link to another theory I did on The Walking Dead, exploring how technically everyone on the series should be deaf. Not dead, deaf. It means Rick and the gang are literally the Walking Death. Badoom-ching. So there you go, some good options for you. And remember, guys, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Forget IP ownership and movie rights and all that legal nonsense. There's one reason and one reason only the X-Men universe has to stay separate from the rest of Marvel's properties. Because you know Magneto would have his way with anyone named Iron Man. Quickest battle ever. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that's calling out the film industry for a serious lack of imagination in their posters this year. Batman v Superman, Civil War, Neighbors 2? I'm noticing a pattern here, guys. And sure, the trend nowadays is to just slap two superheroes together and have them duke it out, but the X-Men have been doing that for well over a decade. These mutants never got along. Come on, Wolverine, you don't have to punch Deadpool in the face. Hey, Jean Grey, it would be great if you didn't disintegrate Cyclops, alright? Charles, Eric, can the two of you act like adults and not try to kill each other for just one movie? No, not even once. And it ain't stopping anytime soon either, since there's another mutant war on the horizon in X-Men Apocalypse. So knowing that, it's high time we start looking into the powers of these extra-normal humans and prep some strategies for how to handle some of the franchise's heaviest hitters. And who better to start with than Magneto? I mean, when I was a wee 8-year-old educating my classmates on the proper hand-to-hand traction for swinging on the monkey bars, there was only one thing I wanted to be: a mutant. Sign me up for Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, aka American Hogwarts. Teach me how to throw a car with my mind, or shoot laser beams out of my eyes, or freeze a pencil in thin air. You know, practical, everyday useful stuff. Or at least as useful as I've found calculus to be in my everyday life. But amongst all the awesome mutants and awesome powers, there was one who stood out from the rest. The most awesome one of all, Magneto. And yeah, flame war in the comments, all you Wolverine fans, please snicked away your retractable claws and get honest with yourselves for a moment. Wolverine is great, don't get me wrong, but can he stop a bullet in midair? Can he lift a car without even touching it? Can he fly? I don't think so, but you know who can? Magneto. And probably Storm, too. She could probably do those things. Jean, along with a few others in the X-Men universe, since those sorts of powers aren't really that rare to come by, but that just makes Wolverine's inability to do them all the more unacceptable. But Wolvie rants aside, when you really look at it, the story of the X-Men movies for the last 15 years has truly been the story of Magneto and his relationship with Professor X. And yet, in writing this episode, I was disillusioned. Because for as grandiose as he talks, and as powerful as he seems, when you get right down to it, Magneto is one of the most vulnerable mutants in all of these films. The guy's a glass cannon, powerful but fragile. And his biggest weakness, one that you could use to take him down yourself, is one that you probably wouldn't expect. Now, to truly appreciate Magneto's one fatal flaw, we have to first understand just how he does what he does. What makes the guy tick? The source behind all his powers. Magnets. Who would have ever guessed? But for as simple as that explanation is, there's actually a lot more to it than that. Now, I'm gonna guess that the elementary teacher who had you play with horseshoe magnets and paper clips in school didn't tell you that there are actually 6 different types of magnetic force. 6. Bet you'll be looking at those refrigerator magnets in a whole new way now. The 6 different types are diamagnetism, paramagnetism, ferromagnetism, antiferromagnetism, ferrimagnetism, and superparamagnetism. Of those, the type we're all most familiar with is ferromagnetism. This type occurs when an object's electrons all point the same way, attracting materials to it. It's the strongest and most easy to identify type of magnetism, and yet it only works on items consisting of iron, nickel, cobalt, their alloys, and a few other naturally occurring minerals. It's actually really easy to remember, ferromagnetic, from the word ferrous, meaning containing iron. Think back to the periodic table. We were all confused why Fe stood for iron, right? Well, Pharaoh. Gotta love those ancient root words. And seriously, think back to those classroom experiments you did when you were in first grade. The magnet could pick up a paperclip, largely comprised of iron, but couldn't pick up your pencil, made of wood. This is all simple stuff, I know, but I gotta make sure that you guys stick with this episode. Stick with it. Like a magnet. Alright, now while I could take you through the other 5 types of magnetism, after looking through all the X-Men films, Magneto seems not to be the master of magnetism so much as he is the master of ferromagnetism, since every single thing that Magneto lifts seems like it would have traces of iron, nickel, cobalt, or an alloy. The Golden Gate Bridge, which Magneto lifts in X-Men The Last Stand, the main towers and suspended structures are made of steel. The ballistic missiles Magneto stops in X-Men First Class, shells made of steel. The RFK baseball stadium he lifts in Days of Future Past, constructed from a base of steel. Even Wolverine! Throughout the X-Men films, we see Magneto constantly bending and manipulating Wolverine's claws. Seriously, it's almost like a running joke the number of times they've used this trick, and yet we as the movie-going audience are always like, "Oh, snap! He's totally schooling Wolverine!" As though we didn't just see it in like the last 3 movies. We get it, his skeleton is metal, alright, find a new way to beat the guy. Anyway, per Marvel lore, Wolvie's skeleton, claws included, are made of adamantium, which, despite being a fictional metal, is a very dense, artificial, iron-based alloy according to canon. Even fake metals have iron in them. So in short, you can think of Magneto as a permanent magnet, attracting and controlling specific types of materials. This would explain why in X2 X-Men United, when Magneto's held in the plastic cell, he's rendered completely powerless. In order to escape the cell, Mystique has to inject a prison guard with none other than iron. When the prison guard has extra iron running through him, Magneto's able to lift the man and extract the iron from his body, much the same way a permanent magnet does. In retrospect, that's a silly sentence. That would imply that permanent magnets on the regular lift humans up and extract iron from them. Gives magnets a weird, evil intent that I didn't anticipate. But just how strong of a magnet is he? Well, the biggest feat we see him perform across all the movies is that aforementioned Golden Gate Bridge scene from Last Stand. A structure weighing 887,000 tons, or 804 million kilograms. Based on the bridge's weight and the magnetic strength required to generate enough lift to levitate other, much smaller objects, we were able to calculate that the strength of Magneto's magnetic field would be in the range of 100 million Tesla, a magnetic force that can only be found in neutron stars. By comparison, you know what the strongest magnet we have on Earth is? 100 Tesla. 100. Oh yeah, and by the way, hashtag not spawned by Tesla, the car company. It's just that Nikola Tesla did all sorts of cool stuff. In short, Magneto is 1 million times stronger than any magnet we've been able to produce here on Earth. That's insane! How do you stop a juggernaut like that?
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
Well, it's a whole lot easier than you think. Bullets. Seriously, you just shoot him. Remember, Magneto is ferromagnetic, so not all metal is under his control, and bullets, by and large, are made with a lead core encased with a copper jacket, both of which are non-magnetic materials, which means Magneto should have no more control over a bullet than he would the plastic cell from X2, or even a plastic water bottle for that matter. If you watch the series with this knowledge, you'll notice that throughout the X-Men films, Magneto shows very little success at stopping bullets. In the famously awesome Quicksilver time in a bottle sequence, Magneto has complete control over all the kitchen utensils, but it's up to Quicksilver to deflect the bullets and save Eric and Charles's life. And then at the end of Days of Future Past, Mystique shoots Magneto in the neck. The movie makes it seem like this is because Magneto's distracted by the Sentinel, but in truth, it's because his magnetic powers don't extend to bullets. Now, I can totally see you being skeptical about this. What about that awesome scene from the first X-Men movie where Magneto is surrounded by the police officers? powers, I hear you saying. He stops a bullet right there. And yeah, you're right, he does stop a bullet in that scene. But let's pick it apart, shall we? Magneto starts the scene by turning each of the officers' guns against them. And this falls well under the purview of his powers, as most guns are made from aluminum and steel. So no big surprise. And a really cool, really intense image. But then Magneto fires one of the guns and stops the bullet itself at the base of the officer's forehead. If what I'm saying is true and he can't control bullets, how's this work? Well, my first impulse was to say that this bullet must be what's known as a Full Metal Jacket bullet. And no, I'm not talking about a transmuting anime bullet or an 80s cinema classic bullet, but a lead bullet jacketed in steel to allow for higher velocity shooting. If this were the case, it would be easy for Magneto to control, except that we get a good look at that bullet spinning in midair, and it doesn't have the long, more aerodynamic shape of a full metal bullet. Further complicating the situation is that in the late 90s, several major cities in the US, including New York, the setting for this scene, stopped using full metal jacketed bullets in favor of hollow point HST ammunition, bullets designed to expand once they hit. The intent is to cause a high level of damage immediately around the entry point, which disables the target. These HST bullets tend to be shorter and rounder and are jacketed not with steel, but with copper, a non-ferrous, almost completely non-ferromagnetic metal, meaning that in the real world, the bullets carried by the majority of major US cities would be totally unaffected by Magneto's powers. In other words, they would definitely pose a threat to him, but they wouldn't explain this situation at all. So what's going on here? Am I completely off the mark in my analysis of Magneto's powers? Well, no. Watch the scene again. First, notice the shape of the bullet. Shorter and more rounded, so it's definitely our HST bullet. But notice the color of the bullet. Silver, and not yellow-orange like copper. Also, it's important to note that this standoff is happening at night. These two facts are essential because law enforcement agencies have reported that in low-light, low-velocity shooting situations, they'll use special nickel casings for their hollow point ammo. Nickel, a metal that's completely susceptible to ferromagnetism. And that is exactly what we're seeing. Need more evidence? Pay attention to the fact that Magneto doesn't fire at every officer surrounding him. He only fires this one particular bullet. Why? He carefully searches his surroundings, almost as if he's looking for the right gun to fire, the one out of the dozens that doesn't have lead and copper bullets. For instance, he doesn't fire a shotgun shell because shotgun shells often contain a mix of ferrous and non-ferrous metals. No, he specifically selects the bullet he can control. And if you think I'm reading too much into it, don't trust me, trust him. Magneto himself admits to it.
I don't think I can stop them all.
He's not talking about the number of bullets he would be firing. Remember, this is the guy who can lift the Golden Gate Bridge and catch dozens of missiles in midair. He honestly can't stop them all. His powers won't allow it. So in the end, the master of magnetism, a mutant with power levels rivaling that of a neutron star, my favorite growing up, and a man who can rip apart bridges with a flick of the wrist, can be brought down by a simple bullet, just like you or me. What he's been able to do is fool everyone into thinking that he can control bullets when the vast majority of them pose a huge threat to him. Forget adamantium blades and laser eyes. Sometimes the most effective weapon is the simplest. I guess giving Wolverine a hard time about not being able to stop bullets in midair was a bit premature. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode and are excited for more X-Men Apocalypse action, click right here to check out my buddies over at the Wisecrack channel and their recent video all about the philosophy of the X-Men series. The annotation works on mobile, desktop, tablet, you name it, so go ahead, click it, watch their video. You have no excuse now. Or if you're interested in learning how to take down Wolverine, I cover that exact subject in my Deadpool episode, because the two actually share the exact same weakness. Click right here to check that one out. And now if you'll excuse me, I need a little break from superheroes. I hear there's some Pixar movies coming out in the near future, and some lies that need to be exposed. See you next time. Dr. Strange, you think you know how the world works. What if I told you the reality you know is one of many?
Teach me.
Cool. Let's do it. Internet, welcome to Film Theory, debunking magic one fairy at a time. There's a hole in the hat for the rabbit. The cards behind his hand. Duh, there's 2 people in the box. He's walking on plexiglass. I mean, honestly, the only magic trick I truly can't figure out is how Chris Angel still has a career. In short, everything can be explained through science, which brings us to the subject of the day, Doctor Strange. Also known object and fall to the ground. Push an object to the right and it moves to the right. Ask J.J. Abrams to direct a movie and he'll fill it with a bunch of lens flares and some big twists in the final half hour. These are the fundamental laws of nature. But at the beginning of the 1900s, scientists discovered exceptions to the established rules, specifically subatomic particles like electrons and neutrons, the building blocks of atoms. And these particles often a particle, just like an electron or a proton. It's a bit confusing, but it's important to understand for today's episode, so let me quickly explain the difference. Imagine a calm pond with leaves on the surface. When you drop a stone into the water, it makes a series of circular waves, which, when they reach the leaves, cause them to bob up and down. But otherwise, the leaves stay in the same position. They don't actually follow the wave. It's the same thing with the water particles. The wave moves through them, but doesn't actually carry the particles along with it. This roughly illustrates the difference between waves and particles. A particle has mass and other measurable properties like charge, while waves don't. Waves typically, but not always, need to move through some other medium. That's why, for instance, in space, no one can hear you scream. There's no sound because there's no air for the sound waves to move through. But that brings us back to light. Basically, light has shown itself to possess energy and momentum, which are properties of particles and not waves. And yet, light has no mass, which is like rule number 1 for anything that behaves like a particle. So basically, Einstein said, why not both? In what is very obviously a bad rendition of a German accent, which in turn prompted physics to turn on its head. In 1929, Gilbert Lewis named these massless light particles photons, and thus, quantum mechanics was born. So why do we need to cover all that? Well, because photons and their crazy properties are the basis of Doctor Strange's magical powers. Throughout the film, Doctor Strange uses light both as an offensive weapon as well as a defensive tool, manifesting mandalas of light as a shield to move and repel objects. It's crazy, right? Well, maybe not so much. You can, in fact, move objects using only light. You know how wind blows into a sail and pushes it forward? Well, you can actually do something similar with light because, as we just discussed, light has momentum. So let me introduce you to solar sails, large, lightweight, mirrored surfaces currently being used in space to move objects long distances. Basically, the light hits one side of the sail, which has a mirrored surface. That mirror reflects away the photons coming from the sun, but in the process, the momentum of the photons is transferred to the sail, just like wind on a boat. And in space, where there's no friction to slow you down, those small bits of momentum start to build up. And that's only one way that light can move objects. There's also what's known as the photophoresis effect. When an atom is heated on one side by photons, the gas molecules on that side of the particle get super excited. Woo, we're in the sunlight, we're gonna get a great tan. That causes them to move faster. And as a result, they bounce off that side of the particle's surface at a higher velocity, creating a force that pushes that atom away from the light. And this isn't just speculation. Scientists have recently tested the photophoresis effect on tiny objects, moving nails, beads, and even blocks with nothing but the power of light. So how does this apply to Eggs Benedict? Well, throughout Doctor Strange, we see this on a massive scale. For instance, in this moment from the trailer, we see the villain Caecilius harness a ball of light that essentially pushes the particles of Doctor Strange and the rest of the building outward. In other words, the front half of Benedict heats up really quickly from the intense light, and the photophoresis effect does the rest, causing a ripple effect as objects repel outward towards lower illuminated areas. What's happening on the atomic level is that the gases around the Benedict Cumberbund face particles are getting so excited with this intense light energy that they start hitting him with an intense amount of velocity. So much velocity, in fact, that he gets sent flying against the wall. But photons aren't just limited to moving matter, they can also create matter. That's right, objects made from massless light particles. Seems like it makes no physical sense, and yet, in a recent study, Harvard and MIT students managed to coax photons to binding together into molecules. Per scientist Mikhail Lukin, quote, "They created a special medium in which photons interacted so strongly that they began to act as though they had mass and banded together," end quote. The end result? Light creating three-dimensional structures like crystals. Sound familiar? Well, it should, because Doctor Strange is filled with crystal imagery. For instance, when Doctor Strange first meets the Ancient One, the first thing he sees is light coming from a crystal-like pattern.
This doesn't make any sense.
Well, actually, Doctor, it makes perfect sense. The photonic light tangles itself up with the atoms in the air, so much so that the properties of the atom get passed on to the photons. At that point, the photons basically become an atom, creating solidified light. A light crystal. What you're walking through is a light crystal that is being shattered. And if that just sounds like a weird theory, a weird scientific theory, it's actually happened in real life, as a group of scientists back in 2013 already created solidified crystals made purely of light. Forget Swarovski and its silver crystals, I want my light crystals. And mind you, this isn't the only crystal image that we see in Doctor Strange either. When Strange is practicing alone in this chamber, the first thing he magically forms is, you guessed it, a crystal wall. It's no accident, Marvel did their homework on this one. And I don't know about you, but knowing a little bit more about the science behind these seemingly magical moments makes me appreciate the scenes in the movie a whole lot more. That's just commendable filmmaking, guys. Well done. And that finally brings us to the moment that we've all been waiting for. How do they get those cities to topple over one another in a strictly scientific way? The key here is to listen to what the Ancient One tells Doctor Strange when they first meet.
We harness energy and shape reality.
She claims that there are two keys to their powers: harnessing energy, which they do via photons, and then secondly, shaping reality. This is a very careful choice of words. The Ancient One doesn't say that she changes reality, just that she's shaping it. Thus, reality doesn't change, only your perception of it does. It's the essence of a magic trick. From the vantage point of the audience, the bunny really does come out of the hat. The card disappears in midair and the woman is cut in two. Chris Angel gets paid to do whatever Chris Angel does. The magician has shaped reality so the audience is led to believe in the impossible. So how do you shape reality to create upside down and sideways cities? The key here is in the Marvel logo, which for Doctor Strange looks like a pattern you'd see in a kaleidoscope, right? Well, you are right. The patterns you see in a kaleidoscope are one version of what are known as fractals. Fractals are basically geometric patterns that infinitely repeat themselves at smaller and smaller sizes. Think of a snowflake and how the same shape is repeated over and over in every section of the flake. Well, Marvel is dropping hints all over the place that fractals power the universe of Doctor Strange, popping up all over the movie's trailer. When Doctor Strange enters the Ancient One's lair, he steps across a platform modeled after a T-square, one of the most famous recurring fractal patterns in history. The light mandala the Ancient One first shows Doctor Strange, yet another fractal repeating circular images. Even the roof above Strange's head in the scene where he wields his light whip is a fractal. And it's these images that serve as the biggest clue as to how Doctor Strange pulls off his greatest trick. Because you know what else creates naturally occurring fractals? Crystals. We already know that Strange's crystals create repeating images, as we see in this scene. Look closely and you see that there's not just one, but multiple Benedict Cumberbatch reflected in the surface. Be still, my nerdy Sherlock-loving heart. The upside-down and sideways cities are the exact same, only at a much larger scale. These cities aren't actually upside down or sideways. They only appear that way through a refracted, repeating image within a crystal. It's important to note that the upside-down and sideways cities aren't any different from each other. They're exact replicas of one another. The same buildings, the same cars, the same landmarks can be found in each city. That's because there's actually only one city. Only our perception has been altered, so we see multitudes of intermingling cities. This also explains why the cities start to distort at the edges of the image. These distortions prove that what we're looking at aren't actual cities on top of each other, but merely reflected images of one city. Reality hasn't changed, only its perception has. That being said, how Doctor Strange can interact and battle in a crystal refraction is perhaps a theory best saved for another day. Or who knows, maybe they explain that one in the movie. Full disclosure, this is being written and edited the week before the movie comes out, so I haven't seen it yet. Thusly, if this scene is explained in the movie and this is all redundant information, then, screw you. Screw you, Marvel. Thanks for not inviting me to an early showing of the movie. You invited Markiplier. Does he have a film channel? No. Who has a film channel and is talking about your movie? Me. Giving you lots of promotion for your movie for free? Me. But no, let's not invite MatPat, who has to rewatch and rewatch again the trailer a bunch of times in order to analyze the science of the movie. It's fine. Not bitter. So hopefully they don't explain this in the movie. Otherwise, this whole episode might be a moot point. Could be super embarrassing for me. Alright, I digress. Let's wrap this thing up. Long story long, if there's one thing this video has shown, it's that Kevin Feige's original statement is 100% correct. That even Though we can explain away the magic of Doctor Strange using crazy quantum theories, the science behind it all is indeed magical and impressive. Whoever the science researcher is at Marvel, props to you, man. In fact, you know what? Here, actually, let me look it up. I just went on a rant about being overlooked, so I'm not gonna overlook you. Science consultant for Marvel Studios, Adam Frank. Astrophysics professor at University of Rochester. You, sir! Your name may be overlooked by the millions of moviegoers waiting for that post-credit shawarma joke, Adam, but today, the millions who hopefully watch this episode will come to know the true magician behind the scenes, and that is you. So thank you, Adam Frank, for bringing accurate science to some of the world's biggest films. For that, you might not win the Oscar like my boy Leo, but instead let me give you the next best thing. The Theorist Seal of Profound Worth. Hashtag thank Frank. Wear it with pride, Adam, as you've done your part in making the world a slightly smarter place with science. And that is pretty darn magical. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Congratulations, you're now smarter about quantum mechanics in the Marvel Universe. Impress your friends with those knowledge bombs, why don't ya? Now, if you watch this long, it means you probably like the Marvel movies. And if that's the case, then you've probably really liked the Deadpool movie. Based on the number of views it got, you may have even seen my Deadpool video about how to kill the guy. In case you missed it, I'm gonna leave a link to it right here. But you know what you probably haven't seen yet? Wisecrack's video on the philosophy of Deadpool, which not only has one of the most clickbaity thumbnails in the history of YouTube. I mean, I love you guys, but seriously, bright yellow and click me? You've done me so proud. But also has some awesome analysis of the movie, tying it to classical literature and dissecting what it means not just for the Marvel Universe, but what Deadpool means for the entire movie industry these days. It's incredible. I was watching this video and I'm like, yeah, that is awesome. That makes so much sense, which is usually a good reaction to have when you're watching a video. And that's why I really like sharing their stuff with you guys, because I love their videos, and I think if you like this channel, you're gonna like their videos too. These are guys that deserve way more love on their videos, so please click right here on Deadpool's left butt cheek to check them out. Deadpool will thank you for it. He'll also enjoy you rubbing your mouse over his left butt cheek. It will be very pleasurable to him. He'll probably make some sort of sexual innuendo. Anyway, with that, I'm done. Next week, we move away from Marvel and move on to Pixar for a Wall-E theory that will decimate you. I'm excited about it. I will never watch that movie the same way again, and honestly, it was my favorite Pixar movie to begin with, so I'm excited about that one. Hopefully, we'll see ya next week. Post-credit shawarma joke. I don't know what the joke is. I, once again, was not invited to the early showing, so there you go. Batman v Superman? Let's see. Superman can lift a truck, fly, and shoot laser beams out of his eyes all at the same time. Batman has ice skates. Case closed? Not by a long shot. Get ready to put your money on Batman. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where today we're looking at the most absurd matchup of 2016. No, I'm not talking about the election. We're talking about Batman versus Superman. Now, I'm sure I wasn't the only one to see the title Batman v Superman and just start laughing. I mean, seriously, how can anyone, let alone a regular human, beat an all-powerful alien with a seemingly limitless set of abilities? Even Screw Attack's Death Battle concluded that anime's #1 hero Goku, an unstoppable fighting machine able to fuse with other fighters, channel the energy of the entire universe, and literally become a god, would lose in a fight against the all-American hero. And they came to that same result not once, but twice. Even with Goku having the most powerful item in existence at his side, the comment section wanting him to win. Nothing beats that! So what chance does Batman have in a battle like that? Forget Batman v Superman, a more accurate title would be Superman wins the end. There, I just saved you $20 on movie tickets. You're welcome. But hold on, before you go out and spend that money to see Deadpool a 6th time, sure, Vegas may put the odds at 1,000 to 1 in favor of Superman, but what if I told you that despite the odds, Batman, with the help of some science, could very easily win this fight? That's right, I'm putting all my money on the old emotionally unstable guy in a leather costume and ridiculous voice.
If we believe there's even a 1% chance that he is our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty.
And no, we're not talking about kryptonite. Everyone knows that magical rock is Superman's only weakness. Exposed to kryptonite, Superman crumbles faster than a moviegoer watching Gigli. But we're making this a fair and realistic fight. No kryptonite involved. Like last episode when we killed off Deadpool, I'm gonna figure out a tangible, scientifically accurate way that Bruce Wayne, as a normal human, could defeat an unstoppable alien comic book figure. So where do we start? Well, in the words of Sun Tzu, know the enemy. Which means we need to know what makes Superman so super. Since we're talking about the Batman v Superman, we have to go by the explanation provided to us by Man of Steel. As we learn from hologram Russell Crowe in the movie, he's not innately powerful. It's Earth that gives him all his amazing abilities.
You'll be a god to them.
In fact, on Krypton, his home world, Superman wouldn't have any powers at all. Superman gains his powers on Earth through the planet's weakened gravity and its stronger sun relative to Krypton.
Earth's sun is younger and brighter than Krypton's was. Your cells have drunk in its radiation. Earth's gravity is weaker, yet its atmosphere is more nourishing.
Now you're probably thinking, that's pretty silly. There's no way the sun and gravity can rationally explain a man's ability to fly and lift up an airplane, but it kinda can. If Krypton has a much heavier gravity than Earth, an alien coming from Superman's home planet could lift objects no human could. This is because a Kryptonian's muscles would have adapted to the heavier gravity of Krypton. Think of an astronaut on the moon. The moon has a gravity roughly equal to 1/6 that of Earth's. Since the mass of an object is constant, if you weigh 200 pounds on Earth and you go to the moon, you'll weigh 1/6 of that, approximately 33 pounds. This is why astronauts can so easily jump around on the moon's surface even when carrying hundreds of pounds of equipment. And that brings us to my next point, the changing gravity also affecting how much a person could conceivably lift. A human who could lift 100 pounds on Earth could then lift 600 pounds on the moon. But now, instead of the Earth and the moon, we